Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Wish Upon a Duke by J.R. Salisbury, narrated by Mary Sarah. Chapter 1. England, 1815. Rain. The relentless non-stop rain continued to pelt down on the carriage, as it had for the past 2 days. Typical spring weather, was what she'd been told by the coachman after the first day. Fortunately, she'd been able to afford to rent a carriage to take them to their new home, Skyview, on the southwest coast of England. She glanced to the seat across from her, where her 7-year-old son, Vincent, lay sleeping. The boy had done remarkably well through all this. First his father died unexpectedly. Then she received word that his uncle had also died in a mysterious hunting accident. As he'd never married or had children of his own, this left her son, the current Earl of Dorset. Her mother-in-law had pleaded with her to bring Vincent to England so he could be groomed for his role. She had done this twice. The first time when Roland had died. The second, of course, when Timothy, the Earl at the time, was shot and killed in a hunting accident. The earldom could have been passed to some obscure cousin living in the north of England, but it was time. Time for Vincent to take his rightful place. It had been an easy decision to make. Though her own parents adored Vincent, they understood their young grandson's station in life. Not to mention her father saw the wealth the earldom would provide for his daughter and grandson. Being a lawyer and politician respectively, Roland and James Kennedy had shared many a bottle of fine brandy, discussing how the British aristocracy would have to expand their business interests from simple tenant farming to interests outside their estates. That need had been in part what brought Roland to America. He saw the potential, the new opportunities to secure his future, investing in shipping, the building of ships, as well as bringing spices and sugar from the Caribbean. Roland had made a fortune for himself and his family, until he was lost at sea and left Savannah a widow. A very wealthy young widow. Her father had overseen the sale of the foundry and businesses on her behalf. Then came the news from England, and she made the hardest decision of her life, to take Vincent back to England to claim his birthright. Her father had forewarned her of people wanting to take over her son's upbringing, as his life would now drastically change. Though she was tougher than she appeared, Savannah was well aware of the hierarchy and how women fit in. He had told her to stand her ground if something didn't seem right. She stared out the window at the lush rolling countryside as the rain continued to pelt down, and she prayed for the strength to see this through. She was the outsider. Now she would know how Roland must have felt when he first arrived in America. And again, he had been an educated man with money. Men were always viewed differently. To make matters worse, she had no one on her side. Though her mother-in-law would want what was best for Vincent, Savannah was sure she would have ulterior motives. Roland had told her enough about his mother throughout the years. She was known for her sharp tongue and ruthless ways, and how one must keep their guard up when around the countess. Her father had given her the name of a man he and Roland did business with in London. He told her on the day of their departure that he had written the gentleman, and should she have any questions or problems, to contact said gentleman in London. She had tucked his name into a journal she kept, which now contained crucial information her father had discovered about the estate through the family solicitors. How much they were actually sharing was beyond her, but since her father was acting as the boy's American representative, she had little doubt they'd withhold much. She wished her father had been able to come with them, just to see them settled in and to check everything out. Her mother had been in ill health herself for the past several months, which solidified her father's wish to remain in America. Savannah would make it on her own, take meticulous notes, and ask all the right questions. She was still the boy's mother, and she would make sure he didn't have his future taken away from him. Vincent would be schooled at home until he was old enough to be sent to a boys' school, where he would learn things not even she could teach him. Education had been another topic Roland had discussed with her. Even though Roland wasn't the heir, his father made sure his second son was well schooled, in case he ever needed to take over the role as earl. That had proven to be wise, as Roland's brother Timothy had suffered an early demise. It would be hard at first for her son. He would not have many playmates or friends, at least not until he went off to school. She knew that would be a difficult adjustment for him to have to make. She wondered what would become of her once Vincent was on a schedule. Until he went to boarding school, Savannah intended to stay as close to her son as possible. She wondered if the dowager countess still resided at the family home, or if she resided elsewhere. The dowager countess made no mention of anything, except Vincent and his future in her many letters. Suddenly, the carriage slowed and made a left turn. Though she couldn't see the manor home, Savannah was aware they were now on the family estate. The long drive leading to the house was covered with stone. Trees lined either side, and beyond that stretched a combination of wooded areas and green fields. Even through the rain, she could tell the property was well maintained. The estate boasted fields of meadows sweet, sun-dried grass near the ocean, and thick forests throughout the bulk of the acreage. As the carriage pulled to a stop at the manor house, Savannah could only stare in awe. She'd seen fine large houses in America, but nothing as grand as this. Skyview was indeed far more incredible than the homes of the new rich in New York, Boston, or Rhode Island. She reached across the carriage and shook Vincent ever so slightly on the shoulder. The boy's sable-brown hair was tousled from tossing and turning. Slowly his coffee-coloured eyes opened. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked out the window. "Are we here, Mamma?" he asked, wide-eyed. She nodded. "Yes, we are finally home, my lord." He giggled at the way she addressed him. Though she'd covered many topics with her young son, it would take far more to turn this American-born and bred boy into an earl. It would be worth it. The large oak front door opened as she and Vincent exited the carriage, and a tall, well-dressed older man appeared. The butler, Savannah mused. She held on to Vincent's hand as he stood in awe of that grand home. "I am Savannah Dawson, and this is my son Vincent, the new Earl of Dorset," she said in a clear, steady voice. The butler stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. "I am Higgins. We've been expecting you, madam. Welcome to Skyview." This was the moment she'd been dreading. There was no turning back. Still holding Vincent's hand, she began walking up the stairs, her back straight, as befitted the regal woman she knew she was. She and Roland might not have lived in the manner in which she was raised, but Vincent was now an earl, and she would be damned if anyone would damage her late husband's memory. At the top of the stairs she followed the butler inside. Trying not to stare, Savannah felt in awe of the elegant surroundings. She'd never seen an entrance hall quite like it. The ceiling stood far above them, with an imposing grand staircase descending from the floor above. A magnificent fresco graced the ceiling. Higgins paused. "If you will follow me, I'll show you to the blue drawing room, and let the dowager countess know you've arrived." "Thank you, Higgins," she replied as she followed the aging butler up the stairs. Still holding Vincent's hand, she continued to follow him to two massive oak doors. A footman stood in red and gold livery to one side of the door. Seeing the butler, the young man opened the door. Vincent stared with wide eyes. It was almost too much for either of them to take in. The room was decorated in various shades of blue, with gold for an accent colour. While warm and inviting, Savannah found it almost pretentious. The butler had disappeared in search of Roland's mother, Vincent's grandmother, Eloisa, the dowager countess of Dorset. While Roland had depicted his mother as strict and for the most part unloving, Savannah prayed the woman would accept Vincent and her. The dowager countess had not been too enthused upon learning she had an American daughter-in-law. To her, Savannah was nothing more than a common tavern wench, not to mention she wasn't happy her son had married an American, which she let Roland know in every letter. Sitting down on a gold brocade couch, Savannah encouraged her young son to do the same. He sat next to her, his eyes still wide as saucers. "Mamma, is this where we're going to live?" "Yes, darling. We've discussed this. This is your father's family home, and it is now ours, remember?" "Yes, I'm the Earl," he said proudly. He smiled and surveyed his new surroundings. The sound of the door being opened and the swish of skirts caused Savannah to glance back across the room. A petite woman in her early 50s walked toward them. Her brown eyes stood out against her salt and pepper hair. Savannah swallowed hard. She would never meet the woman's expectations. It was evident in her expression she showed Savannah as she peered from her to Vincent, then back. "Horrible day for travel, but I see you both made it safely," the dowager countess observed. "Yes, we're happy to be here, Lady Dorset," Savannah replied. It was a difficult journey. Ignoring her, the older woman focused her attention on Vincent. "You look so much like your father. You may call me grandmother." Vincent nodded, saying nothing. "The boy can't speak?" "Of course he can speak," Savannah replied. "He's simply overwhelmed by all the changes." "I'll ring for his governess to come take him to the nursery," the dowager countess said, apparently without a second thought as to what Savannah had just told her. "You've already hired a governess?" "Of course I have. I've hired a tutor as well, but we can discuss all that over tea." Higgins entered the room and stood, waiting on the older woman's instructions. "Have Miss West show my grandson to the nursery. I'm sure he's hungry." "Yes, my lady. Anything else?" "Mrs. Dawson and I will have tea before she's shown to her rooms." "Very well," Higgins replied, and disappeared as quietly as he had appeared. Savannah remained quiet, not knowing what to say to her mother-in-law. She had the distinct feeling the older woman was not going to be easily won over. After a few minutes of awkward silence, a young blonde woman appeared. "Miss West," the dowager Lady Dorset said, "this is my grandson, Vincent. Why don't you show him to the nursery? His mother and I have much to discuss." Miss West offered her hand to Vincent. "Come, Master Vincent. I'll show you to your new room." Vincent cautiously eyed his governess, then glanced at his mother for approval. Savannah hoped he didn't cause a scene, though on second thought it might be just the thing to introduce his grandmother to how American-raised boys acted. "Go on. Go with Miss West," Savannah encouraged. "I'll see you shortly." "But I want to stay with you, Mamma." "I know you do, but remember what we talked about. You're now the Earl of Dorset, and with that comes new responsibilities and changes. I'm sure you and Miss West will become fast friends." "Very well," he replied sullenly. He walked over to take Miss West's outstretched hand. Savannah's heart beat a little quicker, seeing her son leave with someone she just met. The door opened once again. This time the butler entered with a footman, carrying a tray with cups, saucers, and a pot of tea. "Come," the dowager countess said as the door closed. "How do you take your tea?" Savannah didn't say anything for a moment, and then felt the older woman staring at her. "I'm sorry, it's just that Vincent and I have been together since his father died, and It's hard to watch him walk off with someone else. Then you have many adjustments to make. Yes, you're right. She accepted a cup of tea Lady Dorset had made her, without waiting for her response to her earlier question. The older woman stirred sugar into her tea. Vincent will be fine. He has much to learn, as I'm sure you are aware. Yes, Roland had shared with me his upbringing. His education was different from that of his brother. I shall be Vincent's. He's the Earl now, and that means changes. He still needs to be a little boy, Savannah said softly. He has responsibilities. What sort of responsibility can a 7-year-old boy have? He needs to be schooled to learn what's expected of him when he takes on his role of Earl. Ah, you have much to learn about the English aristocracy. The dowager countess picked up her cup of tea and took a polite sip. I understand the family solicitors are overseeing everything until Vincent is old enough. Lady Dorset nodded. The estate manager here will run the estate, as will the estate managers of the other 2 holdings. I would like to be allowed to oversee the ledgers on behalf of Vincent, of course. She arched a grey brow. That is highly unusual, but not unheard of. No, I suppose not. I can assure you the earldom will be well looked after until Vincent comes of age. Savannah said nothing and took a sip of tea. I have enlisted the help of the Duke of Clevedon to assist with Vincent's education. He lives in the estate next to Skyview. Why would you do that? Savannah asked. Because the boy needs a father figure. Someone besides tutors to teach him how to hunt and fish and ride a horse. In fact, I've invited the Duke to dinner tonight. I thought the sooner he meets you and young Vincent, the better. You want a stranger to teach my son? Clevedon is hardly a stranger, my dear. He was Roland's best friend for many, many years. I simply asked him to help with the boy's upbringing, and he enthusiastically agreed. Too many decisions were being made for her in the raising of her son. Unfortunately, some of the points her mother-in-law brought up were valid. Vincent did need a strong male figure to look up to. And if Lady Dorset thought the Duke was suitable, then she should too, though she'd reserve any decision until she met the Duke. Then I look forward to meeting the Duke and hearing his thoughts on how my son should be raised. Excellent! Lady Dorset beamed. Then she appraised Savannah's dress with disdain. You'll need a more suitable wardrobe. I'm afraid your current one won't suffice in your new role. How's that? Americans are behind in fashion. What you wear is out of date. No worry. My modiste will come from London to fit you. I'll send for her immediately. Savannah was going to protest, but she had the feeling that would do her no good. At least not now. She needed to give everything some time before she began to make her own changes. Very well. If you don't mind, I'd like to go to my rooms. I'd like to rest before dinner. Of course. Let me get Mrs. Hutcher to show you the way. Did you bring a lady's maid? Savannah smiled. No, I'm afraid I didn't. The one I had didn't want to leave her family by moving all the way to England. I'll have Mrs. Hutcher find someone temporarily. Then you can find someone permanently. Having her own maid, except on occasions where she needed help dressing, was not something she truly desired. She didn't cherish the idea of having to wear a corset more often than she was accustomed to. Lady Dorset rose and walked to the bell-pull before sitting back in a chair. I look forward to getting to know you and my grandson better, she said without a smile. Savannah wasn't so sure about that. The older woman seemed more interested in seeing to Vincent's immediate needs than Savannah's. The disdain in her voice just now made it evident Lady Dorset was going to make life difficult. Will Vincent be allowed to join us at dinner this evening? The Countess stared at her in shock, as though she'd said something blasphemous. Heavens, no! He'll take his meals in the nursery. But won't the Duke want to meet his new charge? The Duke will meet him another time. She was going to ask more about this Duke, but Mrs. Hastings reappeared. Mrs. Hastings, would you show Mrs. Dawson to her rooms? I believe she'd like to rest a while before dressing for dinner. Yes, madam. She eyed Savannah curiously. If you follow me, I'll take you to your rooms. Lady Dorset said. She'll also need a lady's maid, if you can find a girl temporarily, until someone suitable can be hired. Miss Abbott will suit perfectly, the housekeeper replied. The upstairs maid? Yes, she would be more than capable. I have her unpacking for you now, she said, glancing at Savannah. I think you'll like her. Chapter 2. Gabriel Armstrong, 12th Duke of Clevedon, sat back in his chair, estate ledgers lying open on the desk in front of him. Though he had an extremely competent estate manager who kept the ledgers up to date, Gabriel himself liked to review everything before his once-a-month meeting with Harold Bottoms, a man whose father had been estate manager at Brookfall for his entire adult life. The two men met weekly, more if there was something requiring Gabriel's immediate attention. Other than that, Bottoms kept himself busy on the estate. Brookfall wasn't small by any means. It graced the English countryside with magnificent meadows and forests, encompassing nearly 20,000 acres. The estate had been the ducal family seat for over 400 years, making it one of the oldest in all England, and it was where Gabriel preferred to spend his time. London held no appeal for him. He tried to make sure his trips to town were quick, staying only long enough to take care of whatever business might need completing. But then there was the season. Every mother wanted nothing more than to see her daughter married to him, which was precisely why he never let on he was indeed in the market for a wife. He tolerated various balls, soirees, and dinner parties, but as far as anyone knew, he was there only at the invitation of the host. Finding a wife, a woman who would be his duchess, had proven more complicated than he first anticipated. He feared every debutante would be lined up waiting to catch his attention. Instead, he quietly paid attention to who attended each event. He wanted a woman who was both intelligent and pleasing to the eyes. She didn't have to be beautiful, as he often found the beauties were either lacking in intelligence, or they put themselves above everyone else around them. Most who fell into that category were clingy, trying their best to win his favour and attention. The woman who became his duchess would have to be kind and considerate, and someone with whom he could converse. He disliked having to speak about the weather or the latest gossip. He detested gossip and wanted nothing to do with women who enjoyed it. She would also have to be willing to pick up the reins of the charities his late mother had started, which provided clothing, food, and education for the children living on the estate with their families or in the village. A knock on the door caused him to slip back into reality. "Come," he said. The door opened, and his long-time butler, Simmons, appeared. The man, like his estate manager, was not the first in his family to hold his position. Simmons' father and grandfather had both served as butlers at Brookfall. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Your Grace, but this just arrived from Lady Dorset," he said, presenting a small silver tray to Gabriel. Gabriel nodded and scanned the contents of the note. "Is someone waiting for a reply?" "Yes, Your Grace. I sent him to the kitchens to wait." "Very well. Give me 5 minutes to write a reply, and tell cook there is no need to make dinner. It appears I'll be dining with the dowager countess. Her grandson, the new earl, and her daughter-in-law have finally arrived. I'll tell cook not to prepare dinner and return for your reply, Your Grace. Anything else?" "No, that'll be all, Simmons." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper as the butler silently left the room. Moving one of the ledgers out of his way, he began to compose his reply. though he wasn't in the mood to dine with the countess and listen to her rave on about members of the peerage. He knew he needed to. He'd agreed to assist in the schooling of the young earl. How old was the boy? Quite young, perhaps 6 or 7. Though Gabriel hadn't had many dealings with children, he found himself eager to embark upon his new adventure. He'd been taken aback at first when the countess had come to him, but understood her reasoning after learning there weren't any other male relatives remotely near the estate who could serve as a mentor to Roland's son. He couldn't wait to spend time with the boy. Simmons reappeared and took the silver tray, which now included the Duke's reply. Gabriel rose from his chair and walked to the windows. It was still raining, though far less than it had for the past few days. Being cooped up in the house like this unsettled him. He preferred riding his horse and checking on the estate. There was always something going on, and Gabriel couldn't envision any other place to spend his time than at Brook Fall. At a table near his desk, which held crystal decanters, he poured himself a brandy and returned to his seat. The countess was holding dinner at 7, which meant it would be an early evening. That was another thing he didn't miss about London. Dinners started late for the most part, and took hours to complete. He was usually seated next to or near a young single woman, something he abhorred. The only thing good about his position at functions like this was that he was among the first, if not the first, to be seated. Given his family's history, he was usually the senior-ranking member in attendance. He swelled the glass before taking a long swallow of the French brandy he'd had shipped home after his last visit to Paris. No one could quite make brandy, wine, or champagne like the French, and he had a cellar full to prove it. His mind wandered back to the young boy, Vincent. Would he favour his old friend Roland? Or would he resemble his American-born mother? Gabriel had heard countless stories about her, not only from the countess, but from the late earl, Roland's brother, Timothy. Both had been beside themselves when Roland accepted a position as a partner in an American foundry. The countess thought Roland was being disloyal to his family. As a second son, it was not only his right, but his destiny to choose what he would do in life. He accepted no money from his brother, not that he had an allowance to begin with when he left for America. That was the one thing Timothy had done out of spite. Cut off Roland's allowance. Through savvy business dealings, Roland had nevertheless built a fortune of his own. Gabriel had known Timothy almost as well as he'd known Roland. Being that they were brothers, one would have thought they would have been closer in personality. Instead, Gabriel found Timothy reckless and uncaring. Subtly, he himself had been raised to believe that as Duke, he would be above everyone else. Timothy had been raised similarly, but he had a cruel, vindictive streak, and his brother paid dearly. Roland became the victim of his brother's wicked side, and found himself at school unable to avoid the wrath of his brother or his friends. At home, it had been easier for Roland because he could ride his horse across the estate and not be found. Gabriel and Roland had become fast friends through their mutual love of horses. Gabriel shuddered at the thought of Timothy's cruelty. No one had been safe from him, not his siblings, nor the boys at school, nor servants. Anyone who dared cross him at the wrong time had paid the price, and dearly. Timothy might not get his vengeance that moment, but he would instead wait until his unsuspecting prey was caught off guard, much like an animal on the hunt. Gabriel had never been on that receiving end of Timothy's machinations, as there seemed to be an unspoken vow between the two. It almost seemed that Timothy knew that Gabriel's rank made him untouchable. Timothy's death had been due to a mysterious hunting accident, which shocked a few. He was known to be an avid hunter, and his hunting parties were famous. The estate always had plenty of game for Timothy's guests, and he was usually the one to lead the parties out each morning. Gabriel had been invited to several, until he'd mentioned...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?